Okay, anybody left?
Yeah.
I see my charts here, but okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Good morning from my side. As Carsten just said, my name is Björn Ognibeni. I'm from Hamburg, Germany, and I've been working at the intersection of innovation and digital innovation and marketing, service, dialogue, sales for over 20 years now. And directly for companies, but also for a lot of agencies. And my imaginary job title is Practical Visionary. I'm trying to find always new trends, understand them, then do nice keynotes like this one here. And that's where the practical part comes in. I try to explain my clients what to do with them and actually do these kind of projects that then help me better understand also these trends. Yeah? So basically that's my setup, and I also do a little bit of teaching. In the announcement you see that I work at the University of Münster on a totally different field. That's XR, all these headset stuff, but that's not what we are going to talk about. What we are talking today about is Rethinking Digital. That's a course that I'm doing at UC Davis in California. And first we should talk about why should we rethink digital? I mean, digital is already new, right? And when we think about what the world should look like today, like 50 years ago, what people expected us, what this world would look like, it would look like this, yeah, like doing holiday on the moon, flying cars everywhere, stuff like this. And I'm not sure who knows this movie. Yeah, it's Blade Runner, and from the 80s. And the interesting thing about Blade Runner is playing in a dystopian future with flying cars. It's set in 2019, so it's already for us in the past. And we realize, I think today, it's not really science fiction we are living in. Yeah, the reality today is way different. Yeah, not that glamorous or not that very exciting. And the question is, where are our flying cars? Yeah, where's all the technical innovation that we expected to be made in the time between the 50s and today? And the problem is that in many areas we're talking about digital change for quite some time now, but we more see things like digital stagnation. Yeah, like for example, big data. A couple of years ago, everybody was talking about big data. Is the new oil, will change everything? Of course, we nowadays do things with big data, but it's not really that it changed our world. Yeah? And in many areas we are stuck in something that's called the efficiency trap. Yeah? We have something that works and we are optimizing it, but we're never really changing it. A good example is Nespresso. Yeah? I really like Nespresso. It's a great brand, great company, very good products, but it never really changed. Yeah? It came up with the idea in the 70s, and since then Nespresso is exactly the same like it is today, with certain new products, new kinds of coffees, but that's exactly the type of efficiency trap that I'm talking about. But now we are living in a time where the things around us change, yeah, and that more and more is a problem. Take, for example, a company like Volkswagen. Yeah, very successful, sold over 11 million cars in 2017, lots of them in China, and for a lot of time, 20, 30 years, I think even more, Volkswagen was dominating the Chinese market. Yeah, and you see here, that's the black curve, that's China, that's Volkswagen in China, and was way ahead of everyone. And that changed over the last couple of years. Yeah? And why did it change? Because suddenly more and more EVs are sold in China. Yeah? We have more than 50% now that are sold in China that is electric. Overall, the country, if you look to the big cities, is probably more like 60, 70, 80% of the cars that are sold there, it's electric. And suddenly, Volkswagen is no longer competitive. Yeah, you see here, that's the cars that have been sold most in China in the first half of 2025. You see no Volkswagen anymore there. Volkswagen is still selling 1 million cars, or had sold during this period, but all internal combustion engine cars. Yeah? No electric cars, 40,000 versus 1 million. The real hot-selling cars, electric ones, and you see here the price points. Yeah? It's 12,000 to 30,000 euros. That's the range where these cars are really sold. And so really compelling cars with great assistance systems, electrified, really great cars sold at a very low price. But it's not only the low price that is dominating, where Chinese brands are dominating the whole market nowadays. It's also luxury. Yeah, we are in Stuttgart, home of luxury cars from Germany. And I show you a quick video of what a luxury car in China looks like now.
Welcome to China. Welcome to the future.
If you're thinking Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, maybe even Bentley, think again. This is HongQi, the symbol of success in China, and it's redefining luxury Chinese style with confidence, culture, and uncompromising design.
Oh my gosh, what a car. This is absolutely incredible. Whew. Imagine owning this car, guys.
No, not a hotel. No, not a spaceship. This is a car, a concept car by HongQi, China's luxury brand built for VIPs. Seatbelts, of course.
Yeah, it looks way different than the S-Class. I'm not sure about the new S-Class, but probably also won't have a sofa in there. And that's only one industry. China dominates more and more industries. Yeah, I think you all heard about Temu. Maybe some of you are already customers. But it's also machine manufacturing, shipbuilding, everywhere. These Chinese companies suddenly pop up and dominate these industries. And we now have to find new ideas to compete. Yeah, we can no longer only do efficiency stuff. And the question is, where do we find new ideas? Yeah, and back in the 90s, we were in a similar situation, especially the car industry. We had the problem that Toyota, everybody laughed about Asian cars back then in the 80s, but in the 90s, Toyota was much better. Yeah? Better cars, better quality, better price points, and everybody asked themselves, why is that the case? How is it possible? And there was one MIT study, and out of the study came this book that changed the whole Western car industry in the 90s. Yeah? How the production system of Toyota could be used for them too, and back then it was no problem learning from this, and all car manufacturers adopted this better system. Yeah, and that's quite similar of what we have to do today. The question is, where do we find these ideas today? And as I already mentioned, that might be China. Yeah, I also look very often in the US for new trends, but with the exception of AI, there hasn't much been happening over the last couple of years. Yeah, that's different in China, and the problem is we don't know anything about this, yeah, because we have a problem that I like to call asymmetric ignorance. Yeah. Chinese know everything about us. We don't know. We don't even know what we don't know about China. Just to make a point here, I think everybody here in the room knows which companies these guys have founded. But think about if you know any of those. You know, these are all very famous founders of extremely successful companies. The first one founded a company that's HEYi. That's the market leader worldwide for large appliance goods. Li Yun founded Xiaomi. Who has a Xiaomi product at home? Yeah, not that many. Also a very successful company. And the last one is the founder of Huawei. And we take these three companies to understand what's interesting there. But before we do this, we ask ourselves, why should we care? Yeah, we don't do any business in China. My job is hopefully still safe. Why should we care about Chinese companies? First of all, because we get surprised by Chinese companies. Yeah? We already talked about Temu, we talked about electric cars. Christian just talked about AI. Yeah? DeepSeek is something that you probably all realized in January that there's something new happening. Social media, TikTok is a little bit far away, but was also a surprise. So there's stuff happening there that suddenly pops up in our world. And it's also a reason to look to China because we find digital diversity there. Everybody outside of China is more or less in the same US-dominated digital ecosystem. And if you find new ideas, you have to look to places where things are different, and that's in China. And what's also interesting there, companies work differently there. We all know that bigger companies are slower, but in China it's different. In China, bigger companies are actually faster. And the question is why, and that's what we want to try and find out. And the first example that I want to share with you is Huawei. Very successful company, very great products, not only telecom, stuff for telecom companies, but also end consumer business was quite successful until 2019. And in 2019, Donald Trump, being in his first presidency, blacklisted Huawei. Suddenly they could no longer use modern hardware or modern semiconductors, and they could no longer use the Android operating system and the Google apps. So everybody thought that's a death knell for the consumer business of Huawei. And there was one very interesting comment that says that if Huawei wants to survive, they have to invent their own oxygen. Because basically everything that you do in this business is based on these two components, and if you no longer have it, you have a problem. But lo and behold, Huawei was able to compensate these problems. Like, for example, they reinvented certain things in the semiconductor business. They are now very successful with their own AI chips, and they are not there on the hardware side, but they were able to compensate the problems that they have on the hardware side with mathematics, with algorithms. So their chips are not that bad. They are actually pretty good now. And they also now have, again, because they have the semiconductors, a successful business with consumer electronics products. You see here, it's not very good to see, but Huawei is the red line. And it's now battling together with Xiaomi, being the first in smartphone sales in China. But you see where Apple is. Back a while ago, Apple was dominating the Chinese market, just like Volkswagen. And now, the Xiaomi and Huawei are again at each other. And the interesting question is, what about the operating system? They can no longer use Android, they can no longer use Google apps, which weren't working in China anyway. But they actually came up with their own operating system. That was pretty crap in 2019 when they launched, but now in 2025, they have a system that's called Harmony OS Next. It has no longer any connection to any Western software, and it has a completely new vision for a mobile operating system. And the vision is the Internet of Everything. They want to connect really everything that has an IP number, and one of the things that they are connecting are cars. They are also selling cars in their shops, and they are running on Harmony OS, as well as the phones and the clocks and the watches and the pads and the computers. It's not like CarPlay, where you just can listen to your podcast in your car, but actually the car is running on the same operating system. But they could also let the management system, the traffic management system of the city run on the same operating system, which makes it possible that the car, because it's the same operating system, sees the traffic lights and knows how long it takes for the traffic light to get green or get red. And it's also very interesting aspect because suddenly there's the first operating system, a complete platform for everything that's computing related possible, that's beyond any Western control. Mac OS, Google, Microsoft, it's all not controlled by Germans but Americans, and probably a couple of NSA backdoors in all of these systems. It won't happen with Harmony OS Next. And that's a real problem. And why is that the case? Because we meaning we the West, told them we can no longer use our products. We thought that they will stop doing things, but actually they suddenly rise to the occasion, and that's a very interesting lecture we can take from this. what the role of restrictions are. Yeah? Very often here in the West, especially in Germany, if something isn't possible, or we think it's a restriction, it's a good excuse why we can't do it. Yeah? In China, it's a challenge. Yeah? You say, okay, I have to find different ways to actually reach my goal, but I don't forget about my goal. And a good example for this is also Xiaomi, yeah, which I think is a better Apple with a much broader range of products. And they were even able to manufacture a very attractive car. And just last week they launched their second model. And what you see here, the 3 and the 200,000, means that within 3 minutes after launching this car, they already sold 200,000 of this. Yeah, so quite impressive. The car is also quite impressive. But what's really impressive is how quick they were able to set up their car business. It just took 1,123 days from the announcement and the commitment of budget to the launch of the first car model. Yeah, and they had to develop everything, the cars, but also the factories. Yeah, they were able to set up the factory in 14 months. And it now produces 40 cars per hour. Yeah, extremely impressive if you compare this to the timelines, German innovation in car manufacturing. Yeah, and it shows you that competition, the very intense competition in China really drives innovation, but also speed. And now compare this to the US or to we in the West. Yeah, I think you all know Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel thinks competition is for losers. Yeah, he only invests in companies that are monopolies. And I always thought that, yeah, that's probably because he wants to earn a lot of money, and monopolies earn a lot of money, which might be good. No, actually he thinks that innovation is driven by monopolies have so much money. And I don't think that's the case. Yeah, one of the companies that he invested in very successfully and which earns a lot of money is Meta. Yeah, and Meta, for example, has Facebook, but Facebook earns a lot of money but never really evolved. Yeah, it never really changed. The only service from Meta, the only app that changed was Instagram. And who wants to take a guess why Instagram changed? Because of TikTok, right? Yeah, because of competition. Suddenly they had to change something, because if TikTok hadn't shown around, probably Instagram would still be the same app like 10 years ago. Yeah, so I don't believe monopoly profits are necessary to drive innovation. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But if you look at Xiaomi, you can also see the other extreme. When Xiaomi was planning the IPO, they said that they will limit their profit margins on hardware on 5%. Yeah, because he wanted to spend the money on R&D. Yeah, and that's also a very good example for the idea that monopoly money is not possible, not necessary to be innovative. Yeah, and in the West, these companies who have sustainable earnings, very successful monopoly money, like Apple, Google, or Microsoft, in many areas they actually lack innovation. And going back to Peter Thiel, he also thinks that competition is even destructive. Why? Because, as he already said, it eliminates profits. And the reason probably is that for him, the real product of a company is not the product or the service that it provides to customers, but the market cap. Yeah? How valuable is my company? And that's very often the focus of many Western companies. Yeah? They drive a narrative that drives hype, and then that drives market cap. Real innovation is not that important. It's more important to generate fantasies of future profits. And what comes out of this very often looks like this. Yeah, you have a very good, innovative idea. You put this in front of the old stuff that you have been doing, and it generates a lot of hype. Yeah, looks really nice, but it doesn't generate much results. Yeah, and a good example for this is actually AI. Yeah. When we talk about AI, we love to talk about benchmarks, great demos, cool videos, and market cap. Yeah. All these companies that drive AI today are extremely successful in terms of making their company very valuable. What we don't talk about very much is what can we actually do with AI? Yeah? And what do we do? Are things like this. Yeah, McDonald's in the US wanted to automate their drive-through with AI, and it never really worked. Yeah, it was not really successful. That's the kind of stuff that we are doing. And we are investing billions into this, but what we are actually doing with these kind of examples is we are replacing minimum wage jobs, yeah, which doesn't make much sense. It's more interesting, and Christian talked about this in his speech, to use AI as a strategic mastermind, yeah, to find new ideas. And a lot of companies don't do this. And just 2 weeks ago, McKinsey published a study where they said that there was some kind of Gen AI paradox, yeah, because nearly every company now is using AI, but none of them really see a material contribution to earnings by this. Yeah, and that's probably because we use AI to generate this kind of hype or to use something cool, but we never really try and do it to achieve real results. Good example for this is claims processing for car insurance. Yeah? Sounds pretty boring, is sometimes very annoying. Yeah? You have a problem with your car, you call a call center, you fill out a form. Yeah? That's the normal process. I think we all know this. And usually that can be very frustrating. For example, if you have to wait forever to get to the service agent to fill out the form with him on the phone. That's a good way to use AI to solve this pain point, yeah? To scale the call to the service center with AI. Yeah, works great. As a good example, Ergo is doing this. You call the call center, you use the normal number, you use the normal process, but you fill out the form together with an AI, and you don't have to wait, yeah, which is a plus. But you still use the same process. Yeah? Everything behind this still works the same. If you do this in China, you do it in a different way. Yeah, they rethought the whole process. They use a phone. You walk around the phone during a video of your car, and an AI then uses to estimate how much damage the car has and might pay you the amount right on spot, and the problem is solved. Yeah. Way more interesting, much more cost efficient, much more pleasant to the customer, but also better business for the car insurance business, because they really rethought the whole process. The interesting thing about this case is this video that the stills were from, it's from 2018. Yeah, it was 4 years already in production, in use in China when ChatGPT came out. Yeah, very often we think that Chinese companies missed AI. They didn't. Yeah, they already used in production these kind of AI systems without really creating much hype around it. The company that's using this is Ping An, biggest insurance company worldwide. And back in 2021, they already were one of the companies that had the most AI patents worldwide. Yeah, it's a really good example for the fact that Chinese companies were always very active using AI. But we don't know this. Yeah, why? Because we are, again, quite surprised by this. So what can we do when we understand this? We can learn. Yeah, I think China's best lesson for us is that we should be ready to learn, to understand something else before we judge it. Yeah, very often we already know it doesn't make much sense before we actually know what we're talking about. That's something that we should change. We should first try to understand things and then think if it doesn't make sense or not. Yeah. So what can we learn about from Chinese companies about innovation? Why are they so fast? And there's one big topic that's called DEDA, Digitally Enhanced Directed Autonomy. This is one of the ideas why Chinese companies are so fast. And there are three core principles of DEDA. One is that you have very small teams with a very high level of autonomy. Yeah, they can basically function as their own micro-enterprises, but they work on a very specific task. Yeah, they don't do anything, they just want to try to solve one problem. And the whole company around it replaces all the middle management, all the inefficiencies with digital platforms. That makes everything much more efficient, and you no longer have to have this level in companies that only coordinated things. Everybody can do work. Yeah? And that actually works pretty well with a company like HEYi. We see this in a moment. We have a problem understanding this concept because we always think in either or instead of why not both. Yeah? And a good example for this is centralization. We always think about, is a company either centralized or decentralized? It's only either or. But in China, many companies are both at the same time. Yeah, they have a centralized strategy and they have a very decentralized agility. Yeah? Decentralized, very innovative, quick teams. And a good example for this is HEYi. They launched in 2005 a system, so 20 years now, that's called RenDanHeYi. Ren means the team, yeah, the people of the company. It's connected with the user demands, and together they try to achieve value creation. Yeah. One of the core principles of this is you want to have zero distance to the customer. The people who develop the products don't have a lot of organizational levels and stuff in front of them when they talk about the customer. They are directly connected, and they use this direct connection through interaction and feedback to make better products faster. And another core principle is everyone is an entrepreneur. Yeah, as I said, the whole company is split into micro-enterprises, and they form micro-communities coming together to solve a certain problem. And using the digital platforms, they are able to coordinate this within a very large organization. Yeah, HEYi has, I think, 80,000 employees. As I said, market leader for large appliances. It's not a small company, but they are able to do this very efficiently. And then they do profit sharing within these communities of micro-enterprises, yeah, within the company. Works very well. Another interesting thing is, do we either do really innovative stuff or do we try to optimize? And that's also something that you can do both. Yeah? Companies like Huawei and Xiaomi put a lot of money into achieving strategic breakthroughs, but at the same time also do a lot of continuous improvement of the stuff that's already out there. Yeah. The important thing here is that for them, innovation is part of their survival strategy. It's extremely important, so they don't need any hype. Yeah, hype won't help with survival. But at the same time, when they expect results, you are able to finance a lot of more things than companies in the West who only drive hype. You can pour like up to 25% of your revenue into R&D because you need this to survive. And that's what drives the success of companies like, for example, Xiaomi. And there's the last contradiction that we're seeing here. Shall we do focus or build a system? And that's also something that Chinese companies do at the same time. As I already said, yeah, these systems are usually very much focused on specific tasks, but the company as a whole tries to build or thinks in ecosystems. Yeah, and that also works on the macro level. It's not only the companies, but the whole industry sectors work as an ecosystem that brings together certain industries to build new industries. A good example for this is what in China is called the low-altitude economy. Yeah, that's now a completely new industry that's built up there for everything below 1,000 meters height, altitude. And there's a wonder that they are building this industry without actually us here realizing it. And they are building it within China, they are scaling it, they achieve economies of scale. And when they appear here, they have very competitive products we haven't really thought about. Yeah, and the low altitude economy is not a concept, it's already there. Yeah. You already see a lot of drones used for all types of use cases. It's quite successful. And the interesting thing, coming back to our start, we already see flying cars there, and that looks like this. Okay, so to sum things up, we need new ideas to master the upcoming changes, but also to overcome the stagnation that we are very often in. And we do again what we did in the 90s. Yeah? Look to Asia for new ideas when there are new ideas. But the important thing here is we shouldn't not only look at the processes, but also think about the values that drive these processes, yeah? And try to overcome the problems that we have with guys like Peter Thiel. Yeah? I think Peter Thiel won't understand what's happening in China if he thinks that competition is only for losers. Yeah, that's something that we obviously have to change. And we have to stop thinking either or, yeah? Because these contradictions that we saw actually works quite well if combined the right way. And what we've been talking about today is just a nudge to give you an inspiration to look for new ideas from diverse sources. And actually the goal is to be no longer surprised by the stuff that's happening there. Okay, thank you. We have the charts online if you want to take a look. They are there. And there's also some AI research about Chinese innovation that goes into all these topics way more in detail than what we have been talking about today in the 30 minutes. Okay.